Hello, super friends. James here, and we have something very cool lined up for you today. I had the immense pleasure of sitting down and talking to author John Jackson Miller about his new Star Wars novel, Star Wars The Living Force, which is out tomorrow, April 9th. It was an awesome chat, and we're really, really proud of it. And yeah, check it out, and may the Force be with you.
Hello,
Hello,
how are you?
just fine.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about Star Wars today. This is a real treat. Getting to spend my Saturday evening just talking about Star Wars. So absolutely here for it.
Sure thing.
Um, The Living Force is coming out next week. I'm very, very excited. I've got two copies on order, a standard and then one with sprayed edges. If you
Oh yes.
spray any book, I'm gonna get it. So very, very excited to actually just dive into it. My first
Well, we
question.
have we have two we have two of those coming out incidentally because it's the one from Inkstone and one from Goldsboro. And Inkstone just today announced their Kenobi sprayed edge version book that they're doing. So that's very cool.
That was actually part of like one of my questions. It's Kenobi was my first Star Wars book ever. That was the book that got me into kind of discovering this entire new world that wasn't on TV or in the cinema. So the fact that it's getting another kind of release is so exciting.
I'm very happy about it.
So um, as we've mentioned with Kenobi, this has been almost a decade since you've been back with Star Wars. Um, how easy was it for you to get back into the swing of dealing with, the Jedi, the Senate, the Council, and just the Force in general?
My last novel for Star Wars was the New Dawn book back in 2014, but I had done a number of Star Wars works since then, short stories, a novella for the Canto Bight book, a Star Wars Adventures issue for IDW. The whole idea was that I wanted to kind of keep my passport stamped and ready to go in case something came up that fit my schedule properly and worked out also for Random House Worlds. And that's what came about. I was literally doing the it was during the release day for my Star Trek novel Strange New Worlds: The High Country that I was offered the chance to write a book about the Jedi Council. And I immediately said yes, but I also said, a cool thing would be, let's do a story where Qui-Gon Jinn challenges the Jedi Council to get out of the room and the rut that they're in, and try to actually see if they can interact with the people that are on the surface of the planets that they're always talking about. They do go out on individual missions now and again, but everything is always towards these greater purposes. And one of the things that I looked at in approaching this is what's going on in the Republic at the time, what's going on with the Jedi at the time. This is sort of the end period of the glory days. Those are all past. The High Republic, all of that is in the rear view mirror, and so they are very much aware of the fact that they are not able to do all the things that they used to. They may not be aware that they are being manipulated by, obviously Palpatine, but certainly they are very conscious that their great ambitions of the past are not something that they grapple with anymore and succeed with. And so that is part of the theme of the story. And once I had that in mind, it was pretty easy to go forward.
And so taking the kind of story from there, we've got so many Jedi Council members to deal with, and you have such an amazing selection,
Oh
especially
yes.
since we haven't seen a lot of them before. We haven't had any, when Jarl Poof was there, I was, that was such a cool one, and even kind of pairing Plo Koon as well with another of the members.
Say
How
C10, yeah.
easy? Yes, exactly. How easy was it for you to pick which members you wanted to highlight, and actually give them something bigger to do?
Well, that was the plan, to give everyone something concrete to do that would, nobody was going to have a cameo here. All 12 of these members would have a minimum of a certain number of chapters that either they would be, a solo participant in, or they'd be there with somebody else. And in order to structure the book and make it work, I knew that I needed to have a number of cases where there would be duos walking around, two people walking around, and on occasion three. And what I wanted to do was kind of show the dynamics that took place between them. And one of the keys to my approach was, even though it's the first time you've seen Uriel Poof talk officially at all, and even though it's the first time we've seen him talk with Ki-Adi-Mundi, it is the case that these people have known each other for a very long time. So it should feel like we're coming in on the middle of a relationship, the middle of a friendship, the middle of an argument, the middle of them having dealt with each other. So we do get this sense that Uriel Poof in particular is entertaining himself, amusing himself by being annoying to Ki-Adi, who is very easy to annoy. And at the same time, we'll have an interaction later with Apo Rancisis, who is, has been on the council for centuries, just as Uriel has, whose response is kind of like, yeah, we know what you're doing. This is how you've changed. This is not a change for the better. And so these are kind of the in media res, or in the middle of things, conversations that you're having with these people.
How easy was it? You mentioned how each chapter deals with a particular member, or two or three. How easy was it for you to find that sort of connective tissue that made the pairings make sense?
I thought, as I did each one, in some cases it would be fun to have opposites. So again, Uriel and Ki-Adi. But then I also saw that there were cases where, as in the case of Plo Koon and Saesee Tiin, where they are both rather rigid in their approaches to things. They're both strictly business. They're both very extremely competent in what they do. But Plo is a little more open to interacting with others than Saesee is. Saesee is very much a gearhead. He likes the spaceships. He likes the the speeders. He fixes things. He really never much embraced the interactions with individuals that are part of what I think the living force is compelling Qui-Gon and others to aspire to do. And so putting them together where they could sort of see in one another similar personalities but approaching things different, that was fun. Another one is we have Yoda and Adi Gallia, and that's very much a dynamic between youth and old age, and experience, and willingness to help, and ambition that Adi has. She has taken a lot of Yoda's bureaucratic jobs off of him, and it has not helped her to become a better Jedi. And so that's one of the things that comes up in this book as well.
Out of all the kind of members, because you're dealing with a lot of characters, and a lot of characters that very much needed their own sort of development as well. Which of the characters were you most excited to explore in depth?
I like the ones that there's the least written about. So that's that covers our characters like Saesee and Uriel and Apo Rancisis and to a degree Yaddle, where you don't have that much that is out there sort of officially for them. Evan Peel is another one where he's got stories in the Legends era, and what I've written is more or less consistent with the planet that he comes from, having a rough had a rough time of it. He goes looking for the roughest place he can find on the planet Quinn, and naturally goes to the schoolyard. So this is something where I did enjoy being able to elaborate on characters where there wasn't a whole lot about them. But then, I even had fun with Mace Windu, for example, by putting him in contrast to basically his equivalent number in what was the very early days of what will become the Republic Navy. This character, this captain who wants nothing to do with Jedi on his bridge, and recognizes that Mace is a very important person, but just doesn't care. And so I really had fun writing that grouping as well.
It's interesting. You mentioned earlier how you wanted these Jedi, even though some of them are in a way new to us because we've had so little from them, but you wanted them all to be familiar with each other. What was it like trying to kind of introduce these characters to a wider audience, but also make them feel familiar with each other? Was that a challenge at all?
Well, I in the opening sequence, the opening section of the book, what I did was I put them in a place that was familiar to readers already. So they're in the Jedi council chambers. They're in the Jedi headquarters on Coruscant. We know what the library looks like. We know what these various places look like. And so, we can kind of fill in some of the blanks there, and not everything is having to be explained. I do not immediately start them, on the planet Quinn, which again, a fun thing about the book is we have a map in every edition of it, and it's also downloadable if people get the audiobook, or it's possible to also see it in the ebook version as well. I deliberately did not get into any description of that planet until part 2 when we get there, because that is a lot of additional information to impart to people that we need to spend in the first part of the book introducing the masters.
Right. Okay. It's an interesting way of doing it because, again, you're dealing with characters that a lot of people may not be familiar with, but also they have to be familiar with each other. And I guess kind of moving on to the idea of stories is the Star Wars universe is so vast with lore. You've got, tons of characters, species, planets. How easy was it for you to maneuver and to ensure that there weren't any clashes with other stories, other ideas, especially with so much out there in the canon?
Well, that's where we have a team, two teams. We have at Random House Worlds, we've got the editors there. My editor Tom Holer, who's aware of other things that have gone on in the Random House books, and then of course we've got Lucasfilm and the Story Group, and Jennifer Heddle and the whole team out there that are reading the books and giving feedback. And providing some information. There is a particular character that I'm not revealing because it's kind of a surprise to the readers, but there's a particular character from the movies who makes an appearance, and I made sure that I had gotten all of the timing of that character's biography and how old that character would be at this moment in the story figured out before I wrote the section, and I made the case that it was not a cameo, it was not a fan service kind of a thing, but that it actually really establishes the importance of the person that he's working for in that book. There's his superior in that book is somebody who would have been working with younger people who are also, of money and title and that sort of thing. And so, we prepared that. We set it up the way with the manuscript, and Lucasfilm said, "Yeah, it all fits. We're here for it." And so that worked out. But that is absolutely, I try very hard to, not leave my fingerprints on things in the universe. I'm not trying to establish things constantly. But when I do see, something that would help a story like that, I'll put it in.
Amazing. It's so interesting hearing how collaborative something like this is, especially with how wide and how constantly things are being added to the Star Wars universe as well. But what I love most about this book, and just like Kenobi, is it's an expansion on what we know.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you could kind of talk to me a bit about why you think stories like this are important, not just for the Star Wars canon, but also for fans.
Well, when these kinds of stories, first came out, and they not even for Star Wars, but they go back almost 100 years now to the radio shows like the Lone Ranger in the United States had novels and comics that were tied into movies and TV shows, and for so many years they were not considered official, not considered part of anything else. They were just an additional way to make some money. And it was never the case that people would embrace these things as being part of something. And obviously, that begins to turn around in the late '60s with Star Trek, as Gene Roddenberry takes a greater interest in what is coming out under the Star Trek label. George Lucas having official control and ownership over the merchandising and what is coming out under the Star Wars name. And then just the fans themselves, what things to work and what things to work, connect properly. So, I mean, we have fandoms, all through the '60s, '70s, '80s, '90s for the Doctor Who novels and the Doctor Who radio dramas, and wanting to have ways to fit things together and fit things in so they will be official or semi-official or however it is, because they want things to work. They want to expand on the stories that they've seen. It is no longer the case that adaptations, a book that tells the story of a movie, that used to be a big part of what we did, because there was no DVD, there was no video, there was no streaming, there was no anything, no way to relive the story. Uh, now there is that. So that is kind of uh, gone, down in prominence relative to the original stories based on things. And it's enough that somebody like me, I've made much of a career, or most of my career, out of doing these things for Star Wars, Star Trek, and other franchises. And I think that it's a cool thing. It's a cool thing when everything works. It is something that we have been learning to do year by year by year to make it work better. And I really like the fact that I can take the living force and say, I probably would have written just about the same book 20 years ago. And so fans of the earlier material will have an easy way of climbing into it. And fans today will also have an easy way to climb into it. And part of it is my own approach, but also part of it is we've kind of cultivated this particular national park that I consider Star Wars to be, in such a way that it is easier to fit these kinds of stories in.
Very interesting. And you kind of mentioned certain types of fans in relation to eras, and the prequel era was, that was where I grew up. That
Yeah.
was all I was digesting when I was a kid, still am. And what is it about the prequel era, from Phantom Menace to Revenge of the Sith, that is so inviting for these sort of new stories? I mean, I never would have imagined we would get a book like this focusing purely on individual members of the council. I really didn't think that would be a thing. But here we are.
Uh,
It's
it is something that, it obviously it came about because of the 25th anniversary. I think it was something that I particularly was, suited to do because I have done, all these novels with, particularly the Star Trek novels that I've done, which have very large casts. And so I've been able to manipulate that sort of thing. But the prequel era, and this is the first book I've done in the prequel era. The prequel era has themes that are just not present in some of the other parts of the timeline. I mean, this is a period of decay. It is a slow moving car accident that we were watching here. And there is it's a case where the reader is aware of more than the Jedi are. And I kind of played with that when I wrote my Knights of the Old Republic comics, because the readers were aware of what was going to happen later in the Knights of the Old Republic video game, but they weren't entirely sure how my comics connected to them, and was anybody in my cast a major character in the comics or in the game or not. Some were, some weren't. Well, here is a case where everybody knows who Darth Vader is and everybody knows who the Emperor is, but we have to tell these stories with everybody else being in the dark. But they're able to figure out some things. We just get to tell these stories of these missed connections, where if they only had checked into this one thing or this other thing or whatever, they might have seen what was going on. But we also come up with very good reasons why they might not have, and that is part of the fun and challenge of writing in this era.
I was just about to say, does having that sort of foresight as a writer and as an audience, that we know the inevitable fall down of the Jedi, Order 66, the rise of Vader and Palpatine, what sort of opportunities does that kind of afford you when you're writing? Are you able to squeeze some things in there that
Yeah.
people might look at and go, I know what this means?
Well, we can throw in a little foreshadowing. We don't want to go too hard on it. We don't want to overdo it. In particular, this book is, I think, a very hopeful book, despite the fact that it's set when it is. It may be the last minute or the last year in which, they're all still pretty happy, relative to the rest of how they will be in the rest of the series. They're obviously not happy about what they're going through when this book starts. But they certainly don't have this existential dread that is going to start, filling in later on. They are only then beginning to get the notion that, yeah, things are out of balance. Things are not the way they should be. But at the same time, they're able to go to an island planet and have a reasonably good time.
It's kind of like a learning experience for them all. You take these characters, you put them in situations, and you kind of force them to reflect on themselves as Jedi Masters. And I think that's a really kind of brave thing to do with these. We've seen how flawed the Jedi can be, but to actually force them to reevaluate themselves and to shift their perspectives, I think is a great way to build on these characters that we know, but also to offer a different perspective into them as well. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to look at as well is these characters that you've kind of worked with. Which characters would you have liked to have looked at if you kind of had more opportunity, a different kind of opportunity arises? Were there any characters that you looked at and thought, not for this story, but maybe?
Well, I never get into what might happen or what I might do at some point, because those stories might yet happen. You never know. Always in motion, the future is. Certainly there are quite a few people here that I could have written more with. And a remixed or a reimagined book could have had different groupings, different pairings, different there are I haven't done the math, but it's 12 times 11 times 10 times 9 times 8 times 7 times 8 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2. That's the number of combinations of individual characters in here, both as two people going around, or three or four or five. And so that's a lot of different group dynamics that one could explore. I should just go ahead and do that math. I used to know that. It's called a factorial. But I'm an author, not a mathematician. But that does really show that you've got lots of different ways to present these people and lots of different combinations to present them in. And short of having all 12 in the room at the same time.
When you're kind of like doing the maths of it all, when you're dealing with that many characters, you've had experience dealing with ensembles. But for writing, I imagine it's quite a difficult thing to do. How do you manage to dissect and divide and conquer, and ensure that every character gets their opportunity to shine?
This was a very structured book from the beginning, in the sense that when I was doing the outline, and I did this also on my last Star Trek novel, I had a spreadsheet where I knew here are my Ki-Adi-Mundi chapters, here are my Adi Gallia chapters, here are my Yoda chapters, and I did the math and had everything working out, and I made sure that there was this sort of tempo that was going on. We, in the second act, were either on the planet or we are in space. And if we're in space, we're with Depa Billaba or Mace Windu or the villain. Or on the planet, we're in one of these these different combinations. I think it's 7 different combinations, 3 sets of 2, and then 4 individuals. And I just had to make sure that interlaced properly. We never really, until we get to the third act, do we go 2 chapters with the same grouping. Once the action starts, then we're going back and forth and back and forth. So yeah, there's a significant amount of engineering that goes on with something like this. It's not the way you want to start writing a book, but if you want to manage this many characters, the blocking of their entrances and exits, this is partly how you do it.
Wow, it sounds like so much work, but like rewarding in a way.
My outlining is my least favorite thing. It's getting to the actual writing.
Of course. And I've just noticed you've kind of got it there in the background on your shelf, and you even had it in your hand. One of the things I'm most excited for is I absolutely love the front cover.
Yeah.
I know you never judge a book by its cover, but when there's a nice cover, I think it changes it. You want to put it on display. You want it to be proudly presented on a bookshelf. And what was the process like in designing that?
Oliver Cuthbertson drew the cover. One of the things is we wanted to communicate that it was a Jedi Council novel without putting the Jedi Council in the title. I am not really a fan of the compound title name. I've already mentioned Star Trek Strange New Worlds, The High Country. 8 words for a story that really I just call High Country. But there's a reason for that, because you have the branding in there, the sub-branding. But the Jedi Council didn't really exist as a sub-brand. And my feeling was, this is a bigger book than that, in terms of this is a book about a particular thing, including the Jedi Council. This is a book about the living force, starring and employing the Jedi Council. And so I was all about let's if we're going to show the Jedi Council as part of this book, let's put them on the cover. And I don't think there was ever any question at Random House that was what they were going to do.
It looked absolutely amazing. It's so nice to see the kind of like the representation of the Jedi Council in a lot of detail, but also the art style itself. It really pops, and yeah, it's so nice to just look at. It's a really great cover.
It is.
I'm very just enjoy it, basically. You mentioned one of the key things about this book is obviously Qui-Gon kind of getting them to move, getting them to go out into the galaxy and have a look at the the problems that are plaguing the galaxy as peacekeepers. And the one thing I always find interesting about Star Wars, particularly some of the more recent stories we've had, is how prevalent Qui-Gon's ideas and notions become. We've had a book about the relationship between Padawan and Master, about Qui-Gon himself, and what is it about that relationship between Qui-Gon and the Council and even Obi-Wan that you think is so special that is ingrained in Star Wars history?
Well, I think he has a line in the book that he's not insubordinate, he's unorthodox. He is not a rebel. He just has a different approach. He has a different set of things he thinks are important. And he's the one that wants to pick up what Obi-Wan considers the useless life forms when they're traveling. He's the one that's most likely to notice Anakin Skywalker in the middle of nowhere. It struck me that is a bit of a tension that is always going on with the Jedi, between the big picture and the future, and the individual people that are on the ground. I wrote an entire comic series. The Knights of the Old Republic series is literally about the Jedi being so obsessed with a danger in the future that they steamroller over the life of my main character Zane Carrick, and literally kill the fellow students he has, because they're so focused on the threats of the future and beyond and tomorrow, and the Sith, that they cannot see what they're doing to the people around them. And so, I felt that theme was present, that theme was there, and I wanted to sort of play into it.
Interesting. I think Qui-Gon's such a good engine for that sort of debate within the Jedi Council.
Yeah.
There's such a hyperfixation on the future, the Sith, but also from my perspective, the comfortability of where the Jedi Council are. They're so strong in and comfortable where they are.
Yes.
Like we're in a place of absolute peace. We're not going to let anything disrupt that. And
Yes.
Qui-Gon is always one that comes in with a fresh sort of mind, going, actually, I think we need to look at these issues. And what a great engine for you to be able to actually explore that in your book as well.
That's a very good observation. It deals with the dynamics of groups. Back in my political science days, one of the things I studied was what they call groupthink, which is how organizations fail by being so cognizant of their own power, so confident in their own rightness, and so unwilling to listen to alternate opinions, that they end up making what they call suboptimal or poor decisions. And how so many historical disasters have come about because they had a failure to imagine that they weren't up to whatever the particular challenge was, or that they just didn't see what a particular problem was. This is the sort of thing that is studied, having to do with boardrooms and governments and things like that. And I saw no reason not to apply it to the Jedi Council.
100%. It's so kind of prevalent within the council that it's difficult to ignore the faults within the council. You know, they may be powerful, they may be peacekeepers, but there's a lot that they got wrong there. And I think what your idea of challenging these characters highlights is how they need to be guided into this sort of original thinking for the Jedi. And I think it offers a new perspective on the Jedi as well, especially because, you know, the prequels primarily focus on the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan, that we don't get to see a lot of the peacekeeping. You know, we're thrown straight into the Clone Wars. That I think is a really, really strong opportunity to show these individual characters actually contributing to different causes that are
Thanks for
smaller
watching,
than
Super Friends.
what they would
If
normally
you
do,
enjoyed this
smaller than
video,
what we
then
would
make sure to hit the subscribe
originally see
button
the
just
Jedi
down
do.
below and hit the bell
Right.
so that you can get notified
No,
whenever we
absolutely.
release
And,
brand new
and, you know,
videos.
that
In
element
fact,
of
there's
scale
2
is-
more
is
waiting for you to
definitely in this
watch
book.
right here below. So what are you waiting
some
for?
of the Jedi are correct,
Why not click play?
on the council that it is not the Jedi's job to go running around, putting out these very small fires. It is they have people for that. That is their that's the structure that there's the things that they let the masters do, the knights do, the Padawans do. There are things that are left to the Republic government. But you can't always have all that stuff delegated, or they will miss what's happening, much like a politician that never goes home.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of the things I wanted to kind of reflect on is I asked about characters that you really enjoyed writing, and it seems like you had such a good time dealing with all of them in, regardless of how many there were. Were there any characters that not provided a challenge, but required a bit more thought on how to bring them all into the fold and to kind of gel with others?
I had characters like well, obviously Yoda has such a big background. He's got a lot of stuff written about him. He's at a certain point in time in his life and career here. I needed to sort of balance my Yoda with the Yoda that we see at this point in the timeline, but I wanted to also show hints of a more soulful Yoda, like we see later on, after everything has gone wrong. I figured that character was always there, and still there. I just needed to find a way to actually fit him into my narrative in a good place. And in fact, I think he does have one of the more personal stories. Yaddle as well, one of the more personal stories. I there were characters that I was more interested in seeing in action, and we get them in action. And then there are characters that I was like, I don't know how this person would look in action. And Apo Rancisis, for example, who's got the big serpent tail, and I was like, well, let's figure out a way to do it, and so we did it.
I think I love the phrasing that you use, like your Yoda and a Yoda that we see, because I think that's such a interesting concept where we've kind of got our own personal connections with certain characters. And I was wondering, how easy was it for you to find a balance between, a version that you wanted to explore, but also a version that fans would recognize?
Well, I think every author tries to make a character of their own, even as they are aware that they're doing somebody else's character. You don't want to go off model. You don't want to do anything that's not going to fit. But my character, or my version of Yoda, my version of Qui-Gon, my version of Obi-Wan, they're going to emphasize different things, or they're going to be in different kinds of situations that I want to see them in, if it serves the story. No, always you want to make sure that whatever you're doing is still on model and that it still sounds like them. That was one of the cases where Lucasfilm helped, because Yoda, for example, his syntax is something that I had not written before. and in over the course of the drafts, it was a fine tuning to get his syntax exactly right, because he doesn't actually reverse all of his grammar. It's nowhere close to that. I think they've actually done the math at some point, and so I'm always like, okay, I'm gonna restore this sentence to normality here. But this one sounds better if it's not the normal way. This sounds more Yoda.
I didn't even think about how Yoda speaks and how you'd actually like approach giving him, new dialogue. I never even thought about that being a challenge. Wow.
Yep.
It's so interesting. That's so cool. Because it's just something
Yep.
we're so used to hearing Yoda. It's so instinctive. It's so subconscious. But to actually have to put the work in to make it sound legitimate is
Any given line, you might have three phrases, and you might say, okay, does he reverse 1, 2, or 3? And you just have to kind of hear it in your ear. And yeah, if it sounds like Frank Oz said it, you got it.
you nailed it. That's so cool. Some of the kind of more I guess more personal questions I wanted to ask is, Star Wars has an entire library of books. I've read, I nowhere near touched the surface of them all, but I'm trying to read as many as I can. I was just wondering, do you have a particular favorite?
Well, I go back to the very beginning. So, I mean, my first, what they call tie-in novel, I would have gotten, let's see, it would have been This Week in 1978, because it would have been because April 1st was the day that Splinter of the Mind's Eye released in paperback. And, I was in fourth grade, and my sister handed it to me across the back seat of the car and said, this is the new Star Wars movie. And of course it wasn't. There was a chance it might have been. But that was the first time I said, wow, really? There's novels, based on these things that are not, that extend the story or something like that. That's a really cool deal. And of course, I went right from that into the Brian Daley Han Solo novels, and the Neil Smith, novels for Lando Calrissian. And of course, all during that time, I was collecting the comic books. So, that's obviously my golden age. And I sort of judge everything against that. But, I was right there in the 90s when Tim Zahn brings his books out, and when Dark Horse brings its comics out. And so, yeah, there's a lot out there. And so yeah, I am really happy that people are going to finally get this book. It's again been over a year in production, and probably it's been longer in the actual promotional cycle than it was in the actual writing, now that I think about it, because we first announced it last September. But it is it's going to be a cool deal. Audiobook, hardcover, ebook, in I think most markets, Tuesday, April 9th. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what people say about it.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, I'm personally very, very excited, and I can't wait to talk to other Star Wars fans about it. And, kind of to slowly wrap things up, you've been kind of going on the road with it, and, especially on Twitter as well. I've loved all the kind of like deep dive little behind the scenes things you've been able to offer fans as a way to kind of get to know the book a little bit more. And what has it been like, I guess, as an author and as a fan, being able to share that with everyone?
It's always a trick how much to share. And so I one of the things that I had been doing on my Star Trek novels was I had been posting lines from the book or quotations from the book. And I remember I got an irate message from a reader saying, "You're spoiling your own book. Please stop." And I realized, okay, well, then there's a middle ground before that. So I'm trying to do that. We also have on StarWars.com. There's an excerpt. There's an excerpt also on space.com. There's another excerpt on I think IO9. It's one of those things. Or no, Entertainment Weekly has it. That's it. It's one of those things where I am always trying to figure out exactly how much information to provide, and then we get into these stretches right before the book is coming out where we have the news about the map, and we have the news about the special editions, and it's just a fire hose of information. And I'm trying to keep it entertaining without drowning people. But then I also, at the same time, I've got the events that I'm going to, that I've got to announce too. So it's one of those things where we get close to these books and I'm kind of like, guys, I hope you like Star Wars, because that's what you're going to hear about.
It's been such a wild road, kind of, and being able to hear about it as well has been an absolute privilege as a reader. I mean, like I said, Kenobi was my first introduction, and then I kind of went down the route of Thrawn with Timothy's books. There's among my favorites. But when you sort of open Pandora's box and you realize how much content there is there's so much to digest. But
you have to get some more shelves.
Don't even talk to me about shelves. I have 4 or 5 shelves of Star Wars books. I can't do it anymore. I've got lightsabers up on the wall. My room is 80% Star Wars. But the books have been just a real fascinating way to expand on what I know, but also to get to know these characters in more intimate environments. And so, as a fan of reading and from Star Wars, thank you for bringing these characters to light. Thank you for
I appreciate
giving fans an opportunity.
As Obi-Wan says, you're taking your first steps into a larger world. So I do appreciate that. Just to wrap up on my end real quick, because I have a bunch of these I'm doing. I can be found on the internet. I have notes on most of my books on farawaypress.com. Big essays on Kenobi and some of my previous novels. JJM Faraway is my handle on Twitter, and then it's John Jackson Miller on Facebook, Instagram, and just about every place else.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It is a real big honor of mine. And this has been absolutely amazing, a real eye-opener, and I can't wait for everyone to read it. So thank you so much.
Sure thing. May the force be with you.
Thanks for watching, Super Friends. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button just down below and hit the bell so that you can get notified whenever we release brand new videos. In fact, there's 2 more waiting for you to watch right here below. So what are you waiting for? Why not click play?